Hello, welcome back to Planet 40k. If it's your first time visiting the channel, hopefully by the end of the video you're going to be subscribing for more regular 40k content. Before we get into today's video, random shout out goes to Kevin. He's made numerous comments in regards to the Blood Angels he has, so shout out to you, Kevin. As for today's Space Marine video, we're going to be taking a look at the Vindicator. So he's one of your tank options with the heavy support. Comes in at 7 power level or 130 points for the model. As for the keywords of note, not much to work with here. He's got the chapter keyword, smokescreen keyword, and it's a vehicle. So the smokescreen keyword relates to one of the stratagems, which we'll go over later in the video. As for the stat line of the tank, it's got a movement of 10 inches, weapon skill 6+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 6, toughness 8, wounds 11, attacks 3, leadership 8 and a 3+ save. So this does degrade on damage, and the movement and ballistic skill are the two to focus on when they do degrade, as you'll need to be moving the vehicle forward, which you'll see when we get into the weapons section. The toughness 8 stands out here. This tank is going to take a lot of big guns just to shift it. So for the abilities, Angels of Death. Now out of the Angels of Death, only the combat doctrines are going to have any real effects from the 4 rules within the ability. The rest aren't that relevant to the unit. It also explodes when destroyed on a roll of a 6, and any unit within 6 inches is suffering D3 mortal wounds. So that's all they've got in terms of the basic abilities, so let's move on to the Wargear. So a Vindicator is equipped with a Demolisher Cannon. So there are Wargear options, but first we'll go over the cannon, which is a 24-inch range, heavy D6, strength 10, minus 3 AP, and the damage is D6, and it's got the blast keyword. The range isn't that great, which puts a lot of players off using a Vindicator. The amount of shots is a tad unreliable, and a strength 10 is a bit of a waste on regular infantry models, so I'd only really use this on infantry that were more elite, such as Terminators or maybe Plague Marines, as I class them as an elite infantry, as they've got a toughness 5 and 2 wounds apiece, with that -1 to the damage. So you need to roll a 3 for the damage just to pick off a single Plague Marine. Vehicles and monsters, the obvious go-to target for the weapon. Also, going against infantry models with a model count between 6 and 10 will automatically give you a minimum of 3 due to the blast keyword. So 3 is a good number to work with. So from 3 shots with a ballistic skill value of 3+, you're going to on average hit 2 of those. So going against toughness 5 or less, you only need 2s to wound your target, which should be removing at least 1 model from the table. Could see 2 removed. The damage is D6, which is also unreliable against models with more wounds. Attack bites, for example, are 4 wounds apiece, so it would be a 50-50 roll on whether you can actually remove a bike or not. Against monsters and vehicles at a toughness 6 or more, you require 3s to wound. These are more of an ideal target because the excess damage isn't wasted. For example, if you roll a 5 for the damage roll against a Terminator model with 3 wounds, that means 2 damage is going to waste, whereas on a vehicle or a monster, all the damage is piled onto a single model until it dies, and they usually carry plenty of wounds. The AP of the weapon does improve in turn 1 with the Devastator doctrine, but as the weapon is only 24-inch range, it's going to require you to push forward and potentially not fire at your prime target for that turn. Also, as mentioned in the datasheet section, the movement and the ballistic skill do degrade, which is going to severely hinder the effectiveness of the cannon, not being able to get into range quick enough and then not being able to hit as well, so it has a clear weakness to me when bracketed. Once that 5 wounds remain, it's just not as efficient. So looking at some of the options the tank can utilise. So it can be equipped with a Vindicator Siege Shield. It's 10 points. Each time a ranged attack is allocated to the tank, you add 1 to the armor saving throw against the attack. So for 10 points, getting a 2+ armor save on a toughness 8 tank is pretty survivable, and it's going to need it when it's only 24 inches away. Not quite an auto include for me, as it's only really high strength, high AP weapons that are going to penetrate the tank anyway. You can take a Hunter Killer Missile, which is 48-inch range, heavy 1, strength 10, minus 2 AP, and the damage is D6. It's a once per use only, and it's going to cost you 5 points. Again, it's an unreliable damage of D6, which is quite frustrating at times. The weapon is a minus 3 AP in turn 1 with the Devastator doctrine. I'd probably take the shot in turn 1 in case you lose the tank without actually firing the weapon. So as mentioned, it's 5 points, probably not the worst purchase, just don't save it for late game when you're bracketed. Then finally, for 5 points you can take a Storm Bolter. 24-inch range, rapid fire 2, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. So fires 4 shots within 12-inch range due to rapid fire, which isn't really where you want to be with a tank. You don't want to be getting caught into melee. That's a big no-no for me with a blast weapon, because you can't fire blast weapons into combat, which will make the tank virtually redundant. As the unit is a vehicle, it also can't make use of the bolter discipline from the Angels of Death by remaining stationary like an infantry would, so I wouldn't bother with this weapon if I'm honest. It's only really good against weak units, but to be honest, a lot of those factions right now are nowhere near as good as Marines, so I wouldn't really worry too much. If you do need some anti-horde weaponry, then take the correct unit for it. A full unit of heavy bolter devastators or a Redemptor dreadnought, for example, will do the trick. Let the anti-tank and the anti-elite vehicle do what it does best. I suppose it does have a minor use to removing those light melee units that have tagged the tank in combat, but I think you're better off just screening the tank a bit better than adding a mediocre Storm Bolter to it. So that's the options all tied up. Next we're going to break into some stratagems. I'll start with the generic marine stratagems, then we work into the chapters. So starting off with Armour of Contempt is 1 command point used on a vehicle model, and it effectively gives a 5+ feel no pain save against mortal wounds. So in some games this is amazing, and in some games it's worthless, but it's there if you need it. Against Death Guard units and maybe some psychic factions in particular, they have a lot of mortal wound shenanigans. Lots of weapons nowadays also come with the added mortal wounds on top of the damage, but it is situational. Next, due to the fact that it's got the smokescreen keyword, you can take the actual smokescreen stratagem for 1 command point, which makes your tank a -1 to hit at range. So this one's pretty good, especially for those heavy support versus heavy support battles, to keep your tank lasting a bit longer. As for some chapter specific buffs, as well as the stratagems, starting off with Dark Angels, obviously they've got Grim Resolve for that +1 to hit if your tank didn't move. For the first turn this probably won't be doable, as you need to get within 24-inch range to target something that's actually worth firing. Other than that, I don't think it's worth taking a Vindicator for the Dark Angels force. The White Scars chapter tactic has no real use for the Vindicator, but there are a few stratagems that can be used, starting off with Fainting Withdrawal for 1 CP, used on a White Scars unit that allows them to fall back and shoot this turn. So if it gets tied up in combat, pull out of combat for 1 command point and then fire the blast weapon as normal. Then secondly, you've got Hunter's Fusillade for 1 command point, used on a White Scars unit that's advanced this turn. It turns heavy weapons and rapid fire weapons into assault weapons, so therefore your heavy weapon will now be treated as an assault weapon, so you can advance with it and still fire, but it will be a -1 to hit. So it can be useful in certain situations. Space Wolves could make use of them, not so much for the actual chapter tactics or the stratagems, but they're more heavily invested in melee units, so your front line is likely going to be melee units such as Thunderwolf Cavalry for example. So having a Vindicator roll up behind that to clear up on anything left in the fight, or to pick off a few units before the actual melee fight begins. None of the abilities or stratagems, like I said, really go with this. It's more of a tactical view. The same sort of view applies to the Black Templars and the Blood Angels. Imperial Fists remove those light cover saves from an enemy unit, which makes the -3 AP stay as a -3 AP. So power armor is going to be a 6+ armor save. They also work well with the Stormbolter in particular to get more hits. The Crimson Fists are going to get a +1 to hit against targets that have at least 6 models in it, so it's going to be hitting on 2s for that. Iron Hands do go pretty well with this tank. It's got a 6+ feel no pain save, but also the damage bracket table for the stat line is going to count as double. So just to take it down to the next bracket, it's going to need to be taken right down to 2 wounds remaining, as this doubles to a 4, which sits in the second bracket. If it's got 3 wounds remaining, it's going to double to a 6, and therefore it'll still be in the top bracket. Also, they've got a few stratagems worth mentioning. They've got Wrathful Machine Spirit for 2 command points. So for this tank, you use it in the shooting phase, and you can effectively reroll your hit rolls, which is pretty huge because it doesn't have core, so it's not easy to buff the tank, but it is 2 command points. They've also got Optimal Repulsion Doctrines for 2 command points again, using the opponent's charge phase when a 9 hands unit fires Overwatch. Until the end of the phase, when resolving an Overwatch made by a model, you can hit on a roll of a 5 or a 6 in Overwatch. And if you've got the Flesh's Weak chapter tactic, which you will have because you're Iron Hands, then you can do Overwatch on a 4+. Now it's also 2 command points, but hitting on 4s when it's not even your turn could be a huge deal. It's going to be putting off a lot of charges on your Vindicator. Ultramarines can fall back and shoot at a -1 to hit with their chapter tactics, so very helpful on the weapon that has a blast keyword. They've got Martial Precision, which is a stratagem using the shooting phase. For a single dice you can automatically hit, so especially when you're bracketed you can at least ensure that one of those is going to be a hit. They've also got Defensive Focus for 2 command points. Use the stratagem after an Ultramarine unit has been chosen as a target of a charge. You select up to 3 other friendly units within 6 inches of the targeted unit that are not in engagement range, and those selected units can fire Overwatch. So if you castled up your tank and maybe you got some aggressors with the Flamestorm Gauntlets for example, this could be really making your opponent think twice about a charge. Salamanders work really well as they can reroll a wound each turn, and also -1 AP weapons are classed as 0 AP weapons on your units. Add the Siege Shield to this for that 2+ save that eliminates any mass small arms fire. They've got Relentless Determination for 1 command point, done in the movement phase. If you didn't advance or fall back, your tank is going to be treated as if it's remained stationary. Now that part isn't actually the important part here. In addition, if the unit has a damage table, then until the start of the next movement phase, double the number of wounds it has remaining for the purposes of determining what row to use on the damage table. So very much like Iron Hands there, meaning you can move and shoot normally. Raven Guard got the buffs to their cover saves, so when you stack this with a Siege Shield with toughness 8, it becomes a real pain in the backside to remove. Anything firing from 18 inches or more will grant a light cover save, so this is combined with that Siege Shield to get a +1 save. So even a -1 weapon will still result in a 2+ armor save, so a tank that's pretty tanky, go figure. They've got False Flight for 2 command points. You can effectively fall back and shoot and charge this turn. It's quite pricey, but you've got it there for you. Then finally you've got Death Watch, so re-rolling ones to wound against a set battlefield roll is not bad. They can also rejig their doctrines with the mission tactics, so moving the Devastator doctrine to maybe turn 2 or 3 is more ideal, as you're more likely to be within range of a prime target by them. Other than that, not much really to write home about with their stratagems. So I've tried to be a little bit more inclusive with the chapters as of late, but do please comment below on any combos you know of, maybe there's some relics or some warlord traits that are worth a mention for the Vindicator. So moving away from that, now the tank doesn't have the core keyword, so it synergizes a lot less with all the main characters within the book. However, the Tech Marine is a huge option if you're taking vehicles. Not only because Tech Marines add 1 to the hit rolls for range attacks, but also a Tech Marine can repair D3 wounds per turn, all while making use of the Lookout Sir ability, as the tank is a vehicle. You can pump the Tech Marine up even further by making him a Master of the Forge, so that the D3 wounds repaired becomes a flat 3, then he's got access to a Warlord trait and a Relic too. The trait isn't really relevant for tanks, it's more of a Dreadnought trait, and the Relic just beefs up his melee weapon, which does provide your tank with some protection from melee attacks. A Librarian is another option to beef up your tank. Simply have the tank within 6 inches of the Psyker and cast Psychic Fortress to give the tank a 5+ Int1 save, which could be huge on keeping that Strength 10 weapon going for much longer in the battle. So let's summarise this thing, starting off with the good. Movement of 10 inches, which doesn't take a -1 to hit penalty for moving and firing heavy weapons, meaning it can get into position much better than other heavy supports that are on foot. It's got a max damage potential of 36 damage. Now obviously 36 will never happen, as you need to roll 6 shots that hit 6 times, wound 6 times, and then score 6 on each of the damage rolls. But if you do manage to do that, then go and buy a lottery ticket, because you're having some crazy luck today. The Siege Shield giving a 2+ armor save is solid, especially when you've got Toughness 8 on this thing. Then it's also got a few weapon options which aren't an auto include, but they do add a bit more to your loadout. And finally, the Smokescreen Stratagem is quite valuable. As for the bad, they aren't coarse, so synergy is few and far between. D6 attacks is unpredictable, the same applies for the D6 damage roll. You could roll a 1 for both, which really sucks. Okay, you do have command rerolls, but you didn't really plan on spending them with your Vindicator. The range of the weapon is a problem at 24 inch range, meaning you're going to get fairly close to fire. Now against some factions that's a little too close, especially those that can advance and charge. Once a tank is caught in melee, it's in big trouble, which seems to be an issue in general this edition with tanks, especially those that have got the blast ability. Marines of course do have ways to fall back, but it either costs command points, or you're just lucky enough to have it in your chapter tactics. Then of course they've got a degrading stat line which really hinders the tank once at 5 wounds remaining. Unless you're Iron Hands or using the Salamander stratagem, you're going to be moving slower and not aiming as great. So for the rating for the Vindicator in the 9th edition, I'm going to be giving it a 2.5 out of 5. Guys, let me know if you agree or not, and get involved in the comments, as one of you are going to be shouted out each and every video. Sub if you're enjoying the channel and all that good stuff. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.